All right, let's talk about actually getting applicants to show up for interviews. These are people that want to work for you. Where do you find them? And then how do you get them from random Joe Blow to in your office doing an in-person interview? Now, first off, you want to make sure on your website you have a really good careers page, a place where they can apply, a place where you can show employee testimonials, and we literally have dozens of videos of employees working at Augusta that are just talking about their experience. That's gonna separate you from everyone else that has absolutely nothing on their website when it comes to careers. Also have a place on your website, ideally, where they can apply, but also see things about your culture, a day in the life of. Let's give you a quick look into a day in the life at Augusta Lawn Care. Yes, you're gonna hire someone to come in for a video for a day or two. You're gonna pay them some money, but I promise you, any dollar you spend towards Indeed or Facebook or any job posting, you're gonna have much better return if when they get to your website, it shows off everything about your culture, about your employees, about your team. Now, after they've applied from your website or potentially a website like Indeed, where they submit their resume directly to you and they apply there, I need to communicate with them quickly. I really recommend using whatever platform you possibly can. I would email them, I would contact them through Indeed, I would also then text them, I would call them as fast as possible. The same way that you're trying to jump on the phone when a customer calls, we should immediately, if we're looking for hires and an application comes in, we should immediately be jumping on the phone, texting them, emailing them, and messaging them through Indeed. You're like, well, what if they get overwhelmed? Well, then they might actually show up for an interview. And in a really tough labor market, we need to be as fast as possible jumping on these applicants when they're applying. So I'm gonna be touching them at all potential aspects of communication: text, phone, email, and through Indeed. I'm also going to have a process that's gonna keep them warm up into the time when they actually show up for the interview. Because my goal is to get them to the interview. Not just like to set up the interview, because you might only have 10 or 20% of people actually end up showing up even once they've applied. You're like, well, I think they want the job, so they'll show up. Not true. They have a bunch of other applications they've sent out too, and they might just get distracted and forget about the appointment they set up with you. And so I'm gonna have a sequence of text messages, phone calls, and emails that go out to this potential applicant and keep them warm. I'm gonna tell them about our Audible program. I'm gonna tell them about their career progression and the way that they can move up inside the organization. I'm gonna tell them about pay for performance. I'm gonna send them a link over to the video in the careers tab of our website where they can watch videos about a day in the life and hear from other employees. I'm gonna spread that out just like I would be warming up a client to accept an estimate. I'm gonna warm up an employee so that by the time they show up for the interview, they already know about pay for performance. They already know about our profit sharing program. They already know about Audible and all the team meetings and what we do for safety and a day in the life. This is what makes you different than everyone else they're applying for, is having this sequence to make sure they actually show up for the interview and they're excited for it. Speed ultimately wins. The faster you get back to an individual and an applicant, the better chance they're gonna actually show up for an interview. Once you've got an application, you do not have a hire. You simply need to now follow up the same way you would on an estimate to make sure they convert into someone that in person you can actually conduct the interview. Where do we actually go to find these applicants? The number one place right now in terms of job boards is Indeed. It's the number one place, and that will change probably over the next few years. Things come and go. There used to be Monster, used to be able to post on Craigslist and get good applicants, used to be able to post on Facebook jobs and be able to get good applicants. But right now, Indeed is really the big boy. Now, the problem I have with Indeed is they don't allow for a lot of videos and pictures and creative. It's mostly text driven. And so I need to be able to have links that will go to my careers tab, that will go to my YouTube page and share more creative ways of highlighting my company and separating me from the pack. So Indeed is just someone you gotta pay, and yes, you're gonna pay a daily rate usually, or you're gonna pay a per fee for each applicant that comes in. I've seen a blend. I don't necessarily have one that works or doesn't. Just know that if you're not responding back to applicants and you're not denying them, you could potentially be paying more. Now, one thing that can work, and this is actually an example from our Facebook group inside of Augusta Nation, and that is one of the owners did this, and that is you simply make a Facebook post, but then you boost that post to your local area for the age demographic you're targeting. So if you're like, well, I'm wanting to target people between 20 and 40 years old, you can target that demographic in your local area and then just make a regular post as if it was a job ad and then boost it to those individuals. This is him over on the right-hand side over the course of several hours, just getting tons of applications, and he was driving all the traffic from the Facebook boosted post over to his careers page inside of Augusta Lawn Care where people were just submitting applications. Those applications are of the highest value because they've seen our testimonial videos. They've seen the day in the life. They've seen what pay for performance is, instead of just randomly, someone on Indeed even, submitting 20 applications to any labor position that they can possibly see. Now, even once they've applied and you got the application, as I've said, speed to get them in the door for an interview is very important. I recommend having a template that you copy and paste, just like this one we have for Augusta. These are the type of templates you want to create throughout the entire hiring process, so you're not always typing these up. So copy and paste from a template exactly what you want to say at every single stage in order to be able to get them to the interview. Once you've got an applicant to an interview, the game is not over. We still need to interview them correctly and make sure they're a good candidate for your business. So the interview process is very important. Now, if you're just getting started, it can be intimidating to have to interview people to work for you. If you've never done it before, what I recommend is printing off an actual process and system for your hiring questions. Literally what we have at Augusta is 17 questions that you're gonna ask, one right after the other. For example, what do you know about Augusta Lawn Care? Number 2, have you checked us out online? And the reason it makes it a little bit easier if you have the questions printed off is when you're asking the questions, they know that you're simply reading off the paper and they just assume like, well, this is part of the process. I will just answer the questions. And if you get nervous or you start to forget what you're supposed to talk about next, you just go to the next question. So having a great interview questions that are pre-planned, I would recommend doing this for your first few hundred interviews. Until you've done a few hundred, it's very difficult just to have someone walk in, you're a complete stranger, they're nervous, you're nervous, and trying to strike up a dialogue that's actually gonna lead to a good business decision when it comes to hiring or not a new applicant. So first off, have great interview questions, have a system around that. So we have a little hiring and onboarding process, like before the interview, during the interview, here's the questions, here's the things we're going to observe. These are the type of things that once they leave, I'm actually gonna kind of grade them on. Like for example, did they have fidgety body language? Did they have eye contact? Did they have good questions for you? These are things to actually have in writing so that once you finish an interview, you can accurately judge them the same way every time. Because guess what? You're gonna have good days. You're gonna have bad days. And you don't want that to affect your interviewing decision or whether or not you hire them. So get the questions printed off. Make a system out of it. Next thing is, don't sit behind a desk. Honestly, a lot of people, they're just super nervous coming for an interview, and you sitting behind a desk, you're hiding half of your body, and it puts you in a weird power dynamic. Like, I've found it's usually helpful to just pull your chair around and sit like at a 45-degree angle from them. I'm not gonna do knee to knee. All right, mister, let's talk. Like shoulder to shoulder against them, you're immediately confrontational. Give them a 45, give me a 45, open things up and make it a little more conversational. Sometimes it's helpful to walk them around the office real quick. Give them a quick joke, give them some water. Get them to chill out a little bit is a lot of times the way to break down some of those stress barriers and their nerves and actually get to know them as to whether or not they'll be a good fit for your culture. When it comes to reference checks, I would love to have reference checks after every single interview. And I actually do ask for them in the interview process because it can tell a lot as to whether or not someone's actually a good fit is who are they giving for references and what do they say when I tell them that like, hey, yes, your last manager, fantastic. What are they gonna say about your performance when I call them? And it's not if I call them, but when I call them, starts to like, their brain starts turning and now all of a sudden you hear, oh, actually I got fired in the last, it wasn't a layoff or whatever it might be. But furthermore, when it comes to actually doing reference checks, I would love to do them. And in the past, my best hires have usually been when I do call 2 or 3 of the references. That being said, if you're in a really tough labor market, there are times that a really good candidate will have 4 or 5 job offers within 24 hours. And I don't have the time to wait around collecting reference checks. So a lot of times if I have a really good candidate in front of me and I really think they're gonna be a good fit based upon our interview questions, everything just nailing it, there's a good chance they're gonna have a job offer by the end of the day. And a lot of times, just like your leads out in the field, when it comes to customers, the person that gets the estimate to them first wins. If someone's really good in front of you, I don't mind you locking them down right away, offering the job, and trying to get commitment. That gets them to stop going to more interviews and sending out more resumes, and you don't have sometimes 3, 4, 5 days to hear back from all these reference checks, and yes, that's the more methodical way of doing it, but for laborers out in the field especially, entry-level laborers, that is in a really tough labor market, sometimes they will have a good candidate will get 3 to 4 job offers in one day, and if you're not the one that's first, you don't even got a shot. Okay, so let's assume that you got a new team member, they're hired, they got their first day on the job scheduled, and you're rocking and rolling. The first day is super important. I recommend that being an orientation day for the employee. Even if it's only a half day, I'm not a huge fan of like, here's your uniform, there's the truck. hop in, good luck. That sort of preparation and commitment to the employee is what you can expect in return. Like if you're not gonna trust them, if you're not gonna commit to them, if you're not gonna train and invest into them, why in the world would they do that to you and your business? On the first day, what I like to do is actually sit down with the new team member and go over their orientation packet. In the orientation packet, we have a few page document. In fact, this one is 4 pages long, but it's gonna go over like what they actually want to know. The things that usually take a couple weeks for them to figure out. Iron these things out, it'll make them feel much more established and have a foundation at the company instead of having to like pick up on all this stuff over the course of a few weeks. Uniform policy, other ways to make money, how to get promoted, how to make more money, how to get ahead in your career, the profit sharing program. These are like the things that they need to understand right from the get-go. And there's a signature for them as well as a signature for their manager. Ultimately, I need them to understand this because even though they signed their employee handbook, that employee handbook is like 25 or 30 pages long. I need them to actually read and understand these 4 pages. And I'm gonna read over it line by line, word by word. I'm gonna sign off on it and I'm gonna put it in their employee profile. I'm also gonna go over the training checklist. I'm not gonna throw them in the truck. I'm gonna be like, go figure everything out. Even if they're just mowing grass. I don't want them backing up the trucks day one. I don't want them on a zero turn on day one. And I don't want the trainer having to train them on everything in day one. I want them to get efficient and profitable on one task, line trimming, edging, and blowing. That's all I want them to do for the first 3 days. And this walks through the different ramifications and expectations of every single aspect of their job of those first 2 weeks. We expect all of our team to be trained up and be able to do all the tasks within 2 weeks. If it's gonna take way longer than 2 weeks, either A, the services are too complicated, or B, they don't have the skills or the desire to be able to learn the skills to do the job correctly. And then we're gonna have a trainer assigned to every single trainee, and they're going to actually rank them either as productive, needs improvement, or not productive on every single one of the tasks that they're supposed to learn in those first 2 weeks. This is gonna be filled out every single day by their trainer. And then we give a bonus to the trainer, assuming this gets filled out every single day the first 10 days of them working with us. Having some sort of orientation is really, really important. And then secondly, what's their first week or two going to look like in terms of training? And then having a way for them to be able to know whether or not they're meeting requirements. And if they're not, you should have a standard as to what happens if they don't hit requirements after 2 weeks. Like if they're not gonna be able to learn the skills, there's no reason to keep the business going through unproductive labor and people making mistakes if they're constantly not able to do the skills required to do the job by themselves. And so having a system in place is what's going to keep the culture high. It's gonna allow for new trainees to feel welcome, have orientation to the culture, and then be able to be successful inside of the team. When it comes to building a great team and a great culture, the number one thing that actually sets that standard is not fun to talk about. And that's firing. No one enjoys firing. It's never fun. It's always a lot of tension inside the team, potentially even you emotionally. It's just pathetic. It's bad for everybody. However, it's extremely important you as a leader take it very seriously as to who you fire and when to fire. Firing is ultimately the thing that will create the standards inside your business. Until you fire someone over it, it's just a suggestion. If you want to make it a standard, you'll have to fire someone over it. One of the things that at Augusta Lawn Care we really believed in is having where you don't talk negatively about people and you don't have drama going on. I remember the very first time when we hired someone that had a ton of experience, and they actually allowed us to get into paver patios, retaining walls, excavation, because they had a lot of experience. And they're older. They had probably about 20 years of management of like a crew and all sorts of hardscaping projects. It was great. They trained our team. I still remember the first day that I made that change and Lee was the estimator and having to sort of give direction to the crews. And that included this individual that had a lot of experience and felt entitled to be able to tell everyone else what to do. And he did not take it well. He kept giving an attitude as to why he should be the boss and that Lee should not be the one that was sort of leading the team. And although he didn't say it directly, it was kind of baked into the way his attitude, and then some comments he kept underhandedly saying like, you don't need to tell me that, like I know that, and like you don't need to be telling me what to do. Immediately I fired him. And the reason for that was because I was not going to have the decision of leadership of Lee, that being passed off to Lee, being undermined by the person that was the most experienced, having some sort of grudge or wanting some sort of position inside the company. And so if you're gonna set a standard that like, that's not the way we're gonna operate, you're gonna have to fire up based upon it. It's not gonna be fun. But if you don't want people, if you want them to stop showing up 15, 20 minutes late, fire someone over it. And then in the team meeting, be like, oh, the reason Bobby got fired is because he kept showing up late. Now all of a sudden, it is the standard to show up on time. Most states are what's called at will, which means you can fire someone for no reason whatsoever and you don't have to give them a reason to let them go. In most scenarios, it's honestly better just to fire that way instead of giving a reason. Otherwise, the person can contrive all sorts of craziness and potentially sue you. The very first person I fired literally made up a story about getting hurt on the job and then sued me for a lot of money. And then I settled with them outside of court. It left a really bad taste in my mouth, but it taught me the lesson that if you're gonna fire someone, you don't need to give them a reason. Because if you make up a reason, they'll use it against you and they'll say it's discrimination. They just go off the rails. So sometimes it's just the best to not give a reason. And if you're gonna give a reason, make sure that whatever that reason is was in the employee handbook that was signed. So if you have your rules and regulations inside your employee handbook and they sign on that, then you can fire based upon the fact that they didn't uphold that standard. But if you're gonna fire someone just because they're not really a good fit, or they're not really pulling their weight, or they're not doing a job, or you don't like them, or something like that, make sure you just fire them and you don't say anything as to why. Which stinks, and don't like it. But if you want a step-by-step guide of starting a lawn care business specifically, from zero to past $100,000 in annual revenue, watch this video right here.